Good evening, everyone. I call to order the October meeting of the San Francisco Elections Commission. Today is Wednesday, October 18th, 2017, and the time is now 6:01 p.m. I'm President Jordanek. Secretary Chan, can you take the roll?
President Jordanek.
Here.
Vice President Paris.
Here.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Jung.
Here.
Commissioner Mogi.
Here.
Commissioner Rowe is absent. Commissioner Safant.
Here.
You have a quorum.
And as we know from the last meeting, Commissioner Rowe has an excused absence today. And we also have with us today Director John Arntz and Deputy City Attorney Joshua White. And of course, Secretary Don Chan. Next item.
Item 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda.
Okay, seeing no members of the public, next item.
Item 3, open source voting. Discussion and possible action regarding the City and County of San Francisco's open source voting system project.
Okay, I'll start off with reporting a few things. This was mentioned in the director's report, but StarVote was canceled, which was Travis County's public voting system project, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But basically, I think the main reason is that they were not able to find a combination of vendors to deliver a full combination of open source components. So I think they decided just to go with the conventional voting system. And since the last meeting, I met with a couple, a few different people or groups. I met with a woman named Carrie Bishop. She is San Francisco's new Chief Digital Services Officer. And the Digital Services is a new team that San Francisco formed, I think, last year, which is sort of meant to bring agile processes into the city's technical projects. And so they have, a team of developers and designers to work on various projects within the city. So I met with her to kind of give her an overview of the open source voting project and to, bounce some questions off her about how, we could help move this along within the city. And I also had a chance to meet with the slalom team, which Director Arntz set up that meeting. And I just kind of had a chance to hear where they're at and just share with them, what the commission has been doing and the technical advisory committee, and to kind of just talk about some of the concerns the commission had and just, basically, welcome them. And I also invited them to attend the commission and committee meetings. I also talked at a conference a few weeks ago. This was in Berkeley. And I just gave a 20-minute presentation about the open source voting project. I'd say there were maybe 100 people there. And it was very well received, I thought. And a version of the slides that for the presentation I gave are part of the agenda packet for tomorrow's TAC meeting, if you're interested in that. I also was able to take a look at the RFP responses now that the contract was awarded, which Director Arntz will talk about a little later. So if you are interested in seeing either the RFP responses or the contract itself, that's also part of tomorrow's agenda packet for the TAC meeting. So that's all I have to report. Anyone else? Okay. The next sub-item for this. Sorry? Yeah, okay, so yeah, we're moving on to sub-item B, the Technical Advisory Committee.
All right, hi, I'm Rowan Katao, I'm a member of the Technical Advisory Committee. Timing of this is a little bit awkward because our meeting is tomorrow, and so I'm reporting on the meeting of a month minus 1 day ago. But what we discussed then, I think some of you will recall that at the last Elections Commission meeting, there was public comments expressing concern that the open source voting project might drag on for a very long time. And in a move that I believe is unconnected, we actually discussed a number of strategies around incrementalism at our previous meeting and ways that we might be able to utilize a partially developed system. So the full text is in the recommendations that we adopted last month, but the highlights of it are there are proposals to encourage the process to identify ways that partial systems could be used. For example, as a scanner could be built for vote by mail ballots, which could be operated in a controlled environment just at City Hall. You would only need to build like 4 of those devices, and you could use them either as an what is it, an SB 360 pilot prior to certification. You could use them as a secondary scan or audit of the primary scan without certification, and you could try to certify that by itself. So that has a bunch of advantages, and other ways could be identified as well. And then as it comes to procurement issues, Larry Bifundo, a member of our committee, works with 18F, a federal organization, or I'm not sure how to describe 18F, but it's a part of the federal government, and he's got a bunch of experience with government procurement and knows people who know more about it. And he's going to try to get some people that have done a lot of this to come talk to us. In particular, the Secretary of State for Missouri might come speak. And he has also reached out to LA County, asking them to share the design document for their project. It's becoming increasingly unclear whether that will actually be an open source voting system or not, given their hesitance and lack of response to his request. That remains to be seen, but we have asked. And we continue to discuss how procurement could best be handled, also considering the fact that it was either this past month's meeting or the month before, Director Arntz explained that he's writing RFPs himself. So the department isn't exactly super well staffed to handle large procurement processes at the moment. So we're taking that into consideration as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cattell. Does anyone have any questions or comments for him? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, there was one issue related to tech that I thought we could discuss as a commission, and it's more of a process issue. So, the tech is putting in a lot of work each month into developing these recommendations. We met for 4 hours at our last meeting, and I think the recommendations is up to something like 30 pages right now. And so currently the tech's recommendations are meant to guide us as a commission in advising the department, but there's some desire among the tech members to make sure that these recommendations are actually seen and reviewed in the process. So I thought we could kind of just close the loop on that, from a process perspective. And I talked this over with Deputy City Attorney White, but one idea would be for us to kind of just make a motion as a commission to encourage the department to review these recommendations going forward as they're developed. And because otherwise it's sort of, it's not really clear, do these recommendations stop with us and then we have to kind of review them, and then, how do these recommendations proceed through the process? So before making a formal motion, I just wanted to see what people think about that. And then, but it's just more of a process issue. Okay. So yeah, then I'd like to make a motion that we, as a commission, we encourage the department to review the tax recommendations going forward.
I second that motion.
Okay. Is there further discussion on this before we open it up to public comment?
I guess just to understand the mechanics, would this be a final recommendation or incremental recommendations?
Well, in the motion itself.
Well, I guess I'd just like to understand what, yes,
Okay, well, I
motion
said,
is to the recommendations. However, to my knowledge, there are not recommendations as yet.
well, there are actually. So
Are there? Okay.
each month the committee adds to its recommendations. So in my motion, I said to review the recommendations going forward. So, I think it would be, each month the new recommendations would be reviewed.
Okay.
But
And then would we review those at each meeting and approve those recommendations either individually or as a package, or would this be a blanket?
this would be a blanket. But I think if there was particular recommendations that we wanted to emphasize, I think we could still, we could do separate motions around those if there was something especially important or that we wanted to bring attention to.
And I think that reading the recommendations into the record for these meetings would be important.
Okay.
In some fashion, presentation or in the package or something, right?
Yeah, so one thing that's already in the bylaws is, like on a quarterly basis, the TAC has to issue a quarterly report. And then those quarterly reports, at least my plan would be to include the current state of the recommendations in those. And we've already had one quarterly report, and it had the first iteration of the recommendations there. So it's just not every month would it be, we could consider that, but as it is now, it would only be on a quarterly basis that these recommendations would appear in the commission's agenda packets.
I think Commissioner Donaldson has a good point. That, you know, maybe you want to put a finer point on what exactly you want, you know, the department to do with it, and you know what they're supposed to be, right? So as I understand it, the TAC is issuing recommendations. We're not voting or approving on them. You're merely asking, you're saying, I think you said the department should
Review them.
but you know, I'm not sure who that is, who the department is, and what should review means, you know, if they're not the policy recommendations of our board. So I like the intent of it. It totally makes sense to me. I just wonder if you want to put a finer point on it.
Well, I think the intention is for them to be read, would be part of reviewing and like considering them. For example, you know, Slalom is working for the department, so, you know, perhaps that means that Slalom would also read them, you know, under the direction of the department. But it's not meant to be real specific. Were you going to say so? Okay.
I think that to say they're read, there needs to be some sort of acknowledgement that they were in fact read by someone that they would be impactful upon. I don't know what even the right term is. I mean, I'm certainly supportive of the TAC. I'm supportive of the group that's there. Is a very smart set of people. I've seen the direction so far. I think it's all good, but I think, as Commissioner Jung said, you know, what the thing is read by whom, and to thereby do what?
Well, I think really if the department is working on this project and the department knows whether certain information is relevant for what they're doing at that time. So I think by reading it, you know, they would see, you know, whether certain things are useful. But I mean, the alternative would be that, you know, the TAC creates these recommendations and they're not really informing the process. That's what we want to avoid. So, I mean, I'm open to, you know, if the refinements of the wording or.
Well, I'll just put something out there, and maybe this is too much, and maybe this crosses the line of policy, but something, for example, if the recommendations came from the TAC, that they were somehow considered and dispositioned in the final report of Solemn, for example. That would be clarity and an action taken with some disposition based on the recommendation. That's at least what I would imagine.
Okay, well, there's one point on that. Like, for example, there's a portion of the recommendations that affect the interim system, which is being worked on right now. So waiting for the final report would be too late for that part of it, affecting how the RFP for the interim system is worded.
Then perhaps we're asking for a reading and disposition by the director?
Well, of course, the director leads the department, yeah.
But I guess the point is if it's just a recommendation, that not knowing the disposition is, if this is a policy body and we're making a statement of policy, therefore the recommendation is a policy statement, there needs to be some disposition of how that policy was implemented, I think.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think that you can obligate the director to respond to every single recommendation. I think you can set a policy of encouraging the department to, to consider them, but I think it would sort of be crossing the line into like operational management of the department to say, for every single recommendation you have to indicate, what your consideration of that recommendation was and what action, if any, you took.
I mean, another reason I phrased the motion like that is that I wouldn't want us to adopt the recommendations as a policy because we're not even necessarily knowing what it is that's TAC is being set on an ongoing basis. So this is more just encouraging the department to take this information into account. And again, I mean, this is not, I mean, we could at next month's meeting, we could, refine this motion, or this is not the only time we can do something like this, but.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that and see how it goes?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's take public comment on this item.
Good evening, Jim Soper. I can't imagine the director not reading these recommendations. I just can't. Or people who are on the staff for whom that affects. I think if you say, yeah, you should have maybe from time to time even presentations of certain recommendations, that it's a timely presentation. I think that's a good idea to the commission. And the director will be sitting right there. And then submit to him what's there. Getting a response may be more interesting and more useful. So a director or some kind of response may be more useful, yes. But again, we wouldn't want to overload the director, but I have confidence in him that I can't imagine him not reading it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soper.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Alec Bash, and very good discussion here, and I would simply offer some other wordsmithing, review and consider, and to provide to the consultant solemn for their consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bash. Okay, seeing no further members of the public. Director Arntz, I just want to give you a chance to just reply on this. Like, how do you feel about, a motion to just encourage your department to review the recommendations? Does that seem reasonable, or?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thanks. Okay, let's, Secretary Chan, roll call on this item.
On the motion of encouraging the department to review the recommendations of the TAC. Okay. President Jordanic,
Yes?
Vice President Paris,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Sure. I mean, yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Mogi,
Yes.
Commissioner Savant.
Yes.
Motion carries. Unanimous.
Okay, so let's move on to the next sub-item, the director's report portion.
Okay, so as my direct report indicates, the contract with Slalom has been approved by the Office of Contract Administration. It's been entered into the budget system, so there's actually the funds from COIT tied to the contract at this point. And then also Slalom, as Commissioner Jordanic indicated, has begun to review information and consider the business case regarding the feasibility of building or developing an open source system. They met with Commissioner Jordanic this week, I believe, and some other folks. And the process will be ongoing until January when the report is due.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the director?
Yes. Do you have any idea as to further inquiry about why the STAR system in Travis County fell apart?
No.
Although it is kind of a little outside the normal scope, if you could dig up any information about that, that would be very helpful. Putting together a new system is very difficult, and if there is a very obvious hiccup in the process that derailed the whole train, I would like to know what it happens
I
to
think Commissioner Johnnick indicated that he was going to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I could say a little bit more about it. For starters, they did issue a press release and a 6-page, what they're calling a final report. So that might have some information you're interested in. On a more detailed level, though, my understanding is that their RFP was calling for something like 10 different components to be developed. And I think maybe only, maybe I'm just guessing, but like 8 of the components could be open source, but maybe the other 2, the vendors could not were not willing to interoperate with an open source system or something. But but we don't know really what happens behind the scenes. I've got a couple questions. It's very interesting to me that you noted that the Los Angeles County's VSAP's tally system was submitted to certification, and how did you learn that? Did you attend a meeting or did you just read
SOS website.
Okay, and do you know by chance whether that's open source?
No, I contacted the SOS asking for what kind of public information was available on the application. I didn't receive a response. Might have just been a timing issue, so I'll follow up. I'll try to figure that out myself. But right now, no, I can't provide you any explanation.
Thank you. And then the other thing that's interesting to me about this is that does the fact that, so the tally system, my understanding is that it's more of a back end for vote by mail ballots, scanning and tabulating.
That's what I've heard, but I don't want to confirm that.
Yeah, so does this illustrate that a voting system doesn't need to be a complete system to be certified, do you think? Or?
Can't talk to that. Until I see something, I really can't talk about the product at all.
Okay. All right, so Los Angeles County issued a phase 1 RFP that talks a little bit about this tally system, and it seems that it's just part of the full voting system. So to me it indicates that there is the possibility of certifying something that's not a full voting system, but yeah, if you find more information, that'd be great. Thank you.
I do have one other question about AB 1817. On the 3rd week of September, there's supposed to be an outreach to schools about registering high schoolers to vote. That's obviously one of my favorite laws, and I just would like to know what kind of efforts were made this year.
It was in the director's report last month, and so we actually invited, I think it was 11 ambassadors to the department to give them training, and then we also met with the Student Advisory Council, which is somewhat tied to the school board, so that we get the student leaders to engage with the students at the high school level and discuss registration and election processes, at a high level, not detailed. We had, I think, 2 less ambassadors this past session than we did for the May high school weeks. So our program's pretty solid. I think we're one of the better ones in the state as far as recruiting and getting the students engaged and then going out and interacting with their fellow students.
Were the 11 ambassadors adults or students?
No, they're all students. All students. Right. Mm-hmm. High school students.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Okay, and is there any other comments?
Yeah. I just had a question about the moving up of the primary for 2020 to March, and you mentioned here various that now you're going to have various things overlapping the November election. And without a lot of detail here, I assume that right now you're kind of in an assessment phase on that, but just wondering if any more details on how you think that'll impact the department, resourcing, or if that's what you're currently assessing.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. Basically, I'm announcing that because this is going to come up at that time, that the time frame for submitting measures to get on the primary ballot has been shifted significantly. So that's the main thing I'm doing now, is just giving notice about that. But yeah, once we start to receive the information about in relation to the ballot measures, we have to start producing the ballot cards. So we'll be actually in the canvas, and we'll be formatting the ballots for the March primary, because the ballots go out for the overseas voters in March or January. Yeah. So no, we haven't done June 2018 yet. So, but yeah, just right now, that's like the high water mark, right? Is the ballot measures, just to get people know that content will be getting formatted pretty quickly and still in the November 2018 cycle, or November 2019, which is the mayoral race where there's no incumbent, which there'd be a lot of attention on that. So I just meant it as notice more than anything else. So
Will this shift, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's right. I was just going to say thank you.
Will this shift actually, will it be more stressful on the department?
yes,
Just double checking, making sure that was official.
that's
I figured it
official.
would, but I
Yeah.
wanted to not make an assumption.
Yeah.
Okay, and before moving on to the next item, I just want to, thank you, Director Ernst, for all the work you've done on the assessment project
you.
so far. I came away very impressed with my meeting with Slalom, and I'm very, confident that they're going to do a good job. And I'm also, very happy with the structure that Director Ernst set up for them. And he's got a lot of great meetings lined up for them. So I think they're going to get up to speed very quickly. So thank you. Okay, next item.
Item number 4, approval of minutes of previous meeting. Discussion and possible action to approve minutes for the September 2017 Elections Commission meeting.
Okay, are there any comments on the minutes? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, commission discussion? Seeing none, public comment? Seeing none, Secretary Chan?
President Jordanic,
Yes.
Vice President Paris,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Mogi.
I was absent.
Oh, that's right. Commissioner Safan.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, you have to vote by,
See, you can.
You have to
we have
vote,
a
or you can ask the
clarifying
commission to excuse
ruling?
you from voting by making a motion to excuse yourself.
You're asking me to just excuse myself from.
No,
from before?
you can either vote and assume that your other commissioners are correct, or you can ask the commission. You can make a motion to ask the commission to excuse you from voting.
I'll just go with yes. For next time.
this has come up before, just so you know, but you're not the only.
Every new commissioner comes.
Okay.
Okay, great. Next item.
Item 5, Commissioners' Reports. Commissioner reports on topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities and areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections.
Okay, comments on this item?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the military overseas law just passed recently, I believe this week, if I'm not mistaken. But I would like to know when it gets a little bit more firm, any kind of details about that, about if there's any security concerns.
I don't know what law you're speaking about.
Oh, of course I deleted it out of my email account. Never mind, I'm going to withhold that one for now.
I was just going to comment, and maybe I should have done it earlier, but I attended the same event that where Commissioner Jordanic spoke. It was very interesting, various things about the election and the counting of ballots. Certainly interesting to hear perspectives from a lot of activists, a lot of discussion about hand counting of ballots versus machines, and a lot of interest in open source voting. So it was I thought it was very educational. A lot of interest in what Commissioner Jordanic had to say during that session. And the one other thing I want to mention, entirely unrelated, is please get me your eval forms, commissioners.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to say a few things. For starters, the AB 840, which was the assembly bill I mentioned at the last meeting, that was signed by the governor on Sunday. He waited until nearly exactly 5 p.m. on the last day. And there was some hope, some people heard he was kind of going back and forth on the bill, but that was signed. And I was sort of waiting on the governor's decision before going too far with drafting some kind of a policy resolution statement for us to consider. So I'm going to, do that for the next meeting. And something else, at the last meeting, a member of the public made a comment about an election that happened in 1993. And he made a number of statements. One of the statements was that there was a letter that the department had signed at the time saying something about making reference to the elections codes in the certification letter. And the member of the public said that in 1993, there were exactly 11 divisions in the elections code, whereas the letter referred to a Division 12. Well, I looked into that, and it turns out that there was a Division 12 in 1993, so at least that part of the statement the member of the public made wasn't correct. And I learned that by, I went to the public library here a block away, and I also emailed the California State Library, and they were able to find that information out. Yeah. There was a couple administrative things. The Department on the Status of Women sent a survey form to the Secretary, or Secretary Chan, and it's collecting demographic information about, ourselves. So he's going to be sending an email to you asking for that information. And the Ethics Commission had a couple topics they've been emailing about. One is there's a new law, and maybe Deputy City Attorney White, you'll be able to speak to this, but there's a new law around behested payments that I think will affect the filings each year. And then also there's a proposal around changing the date of the training forms. Did you want to say those?
Yeah, I can send an email to the commission just kind of providing a general overview. I think it's easier than sort of giving a synopsis here.
Okay, thank you. So that's all I have to report. So let's open it up to public comment on this item. Okay, seeing none. Next item.
Item 6, Director's Report. Director's Report on topics not covered by another item on this agenda.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to my written report, so I guess take more questions if there are any.
Okay, just a few questions. One is around the remote vote-by-mail voting. So it sounds like there's just one vendor that can do something consistent with our system. What do you know about the sole source process in the city? Like, what would that involve?
Haven't started. I have information. I haven't read through it yet. I was doing my evaluation there. So it's a different process than RFP. I know that, but I could not give you a breakdown of all the steps.
Okay.
So.
And in terms of the RFP for the interim system, do you have a time frame for when you're hoping to have that finalized?
It keeps moving. I mean, right now I've got the framework set. I've gone through the model RFP, modified the language where it reads cleaner, it looks better. I removed language that wasn't really applicable to this process. And I have a bunch of notes that I've got to shape into a scope of work, but a few weeks for sure. So.
Okay, sounds good. And lastly, this was asked earlier, but this March date, it sounds like you might not have looked into it much, but do you know, is like the city's charter consistent with the date moving for the primaries?
For consolidating the local election?
No, for a March date for the primary instead of June.
Well, the municipal code references the state code as far as the scheduled election dates are concerned.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, since it's a state, it's keyed off of the municipal elections code, so the definition of like a general, election or state election derives from I forget the exact, it's at the very beginning of the California elections code.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Any other questions for the director?
I was trying to look at prior months. I see that we're calling it the voting system replacement. This is still the interim system?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's do public comment on this item. Seeing none. Next item.
Item 7, agenda items for future meetings. Discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas.
Okay, so the items I know for this are, we have the director evaluation that we're planning to do next month. So, everyone get your evaluations into Commissioner Donaldson as soon as possible. Then he's going to be developing a consolidated evaluation that we will then, consider in closed session, in conjunction with all of the individual evaluations. And we also have the commission annual report for last year that Commissioner Rowe needs to put together. And then also this item around AB 840 and auditing, which I thought we could do at the next meeting. Anything else?
I actually found what I was talking about. I'm sorry, I had mentioned it in the wrong item. But AB 1403, military and overseas voters, was approved by the governor on the 14th of October, so very recently. I don't think it needs to be necessarily a separate agenda item, but if there could be at least some address in your memo regarding security with that, that would be swell.
I'd just like to inform you, President Jurdonic, that I'm realizing I have to be on a business trip now the 15th of November. I will complete my work. However, I will be unable to attend the next commission meeting.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's see, open it up to public comment on this item.
Jim Soper, I believe 1403, the Internet Voting Bill, took out anything that at least I would regard as problematic. And so we succeeded in getting it amended, and I believe that the resolutions passed by this commission would otherwise cover future cases. Review it yourself, but I think the certain things got taken out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soper. Okay, seeing no further members of the public or commissioner discussion, that concludes the meeting. The time is now 6:38 p.m. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.